Good evening. Welcome to another movie review stream. My name is Mark McPherson, film critic for movieswithmark.com, filminquiry.com, and twincitiesgeek.com. You can read all my reviews on those websites there. So, it's been a while, and we've got a lot to catch up on. Almost towards Halloween. So we got a few horror films we got to catch up on, namely, of course, obviously we got to catch up on Halloween Ends, the trilogy closer to David Gordon Green's sequel trilogy, I guess you want to call it. It's weird. Halloween always has this weird continuity, so we'll get to that. We'll also get to another odd bit of continuity, the new Hellraiser film, just called Hellraiser. Just standard reboot name. We'll also be covering the latest DC Comics film that just came out last weekend, Black Adam, starring Dwayne Johnson. We'll also be covering the new Kate... we're getting into festival season here, so actually we're kind of almost done with festival season. I just mentioned that just because in my town there's another festival going on. So we'll get to Tar, the latest film from Cate Blanchett, which he stars in. It's directed by Todd Field, who he actually hasn't directed in quite a long time, so I have a lot to say on that. And I just saw it today. We'll also be reviewing Armageddon Time, the American period piece by James Gray, and starring Anthony Hopkins. Like, he's not the main guy, but he's the biggest name. So we'll get to all of that on this stream. This is my birthday stream, actually. I turned 37 yesterday, so I made the Clerks joke about 37. I mean, hey, if Kevin Smith is going to exhaust it, I mean, I can too. You know, I know. So just like a few quick little updates before we keep going here. I do have some other videos I'm working on. I do have some new audio because the Snyderverse video has gotten way too big, and after the Black Adam. Actually, after the last week, there's been a lot I've had to edit and change out of like the letting the Snyderverse go video. Like, it's still gonna have that title. I still think the Snyderverse just it's been grasped for too long, and like it kind of has to go, you know. So that video will eventually be finished. I'm shooting for somewhere in late November, early December, but there's a few other video essays I'll be working on in between then. And yeah, I got plenty more movies coming up. So let's get all this hidden here, and we'll get into our first film. Why not just go straight for the DC? The big one from last weekend. You know, you gotta go with the DC Comics. Alright, so let me get my notes up here to make sure. I'm wondering if the warm light is a little bit much. Might be. Should be okay. All right. Let's get the notes up here just so I can get everyone's names right, because I'm terrible with pronunciation. And here we go in 3, 2, 1. So Black Adam is the latest DC Comics movie about a anti-hero who exists within the DCEU. Now, that might not be like such a big stretch, like an anti-hero in the DCEU after we've seen what they've done with like Superman and Batman and even the more recent editions of like Birds of Prey and the Suicide Squad. Oh great, another anti-hero. But here's the thing, like Black Adam I think has like an interesting character dynamic that is much, in comparison to like the previous PG-13 DCEU films. I think this film sets its goals a lot smaller, which I think work. Like I think it almost becomes like kind of like a mindless action film at times, which kind of is to the benefit of the director Jean-Claude Serra, who's done a lot of big, very fast but very like light on plot action films, which are they're very fast and exciting, and Black Adam is very much that. The problem is that it brings up some interesting ideas and then doesn't really expand on them. Because like the idea of Black Adam is great. The idea of Black Adam is great. Dwayne Johnson, who everyone has been pulling for the longest time from to play Black Adam because it seems like perfect casting, actually does fit this role pretty well. He plays Teth Adam, this man who was wronged during his slave days about 5,000 years ago. Was gifted these wizard powers similar to Shazam, which a little bit of a spoiler, but they don't really mention much of Shazam here, even though there's some direct correlation there. But whatever, I'm fine. Just keep it small, keep it working like this. So he's been in prison for 5,000 years, and when he wakes up, he's not happy that his homeland of Kahndaq is now under the control of Intergang. If you're familiar with DC Comics lore, Intergang, basically this high-powered syndicate that has access to all this advanced technology and weaponry. And so they basically enslave Kahndaq, and so once Black Adam shows up, says, hey, this doesn't look right, and basically goes about slaughtering all of Intergang. And of course, everyone having been living in Kahndaq and having been under this occupation immediately just cheers for him. It's like, yes, please, just shoo away all these Intergang goons who have invaded our homeland. Like on that level, like you have very interesting aspect of shining a light on like imperialism. And then of course you have to have Black Adam compete with somebody, because the thing is Black Adam's very powerful and he's using that power to kill. So obviously some heroes who don't favor killing step in, which kind of makes you question, like, okay, is this still the DCEU? Is this still the world where like there are superheroes who don't want to kill? Is this the same realm as like Batman v Superman and all that? Because it definitely is. Like in the same manner as as Shazam, this film has a lot of like background references, I think, to the rest of like the DC Comics lore, in the way that they would have like kids would have like posters of like Aquaman and Batman and Superman, and they all carry around the comic books and all that. It's that similar staging. But here's the real frustrating thing. First off, I will say this, as a DC Comics fan, I did like seeing the Justice Society play a role in this film. The Justice Society is called upon by Amanda Waller, who apparently Waller has been working with Justice Society this whole time. I don't know why she needed the Task Force X before, if she had the society, but whatever. Like I said, you kind of have to disconnect it from the rest of the DCU, otherwise it doesn't make sense. And believe me, we'll get to all that here. So the Justice Society is called in, and it consists of Dr. Fate, played by Pierce Brosnan, Carter Hall, better known as Hawkman, played by Aldous Hodge, Adam Smasher, played by Noah, terrible with names, Noah Centineo, and Sarah Stahl plays Adriana. Sorry, what was her name? Cyclone. Quintessa Swindell plays Cyclone. So you have a decent foursome here. They have like an interesting setup for their dynamic. Dr. Fate's been around for 100 years. He has the great powers of magic and possession. Hawkman, of course, has the ability of flight and all this Thanagarian technology to have a mace that can form like axes and stuff like that. Adam Smasher can grow big, and Cyclone can make tornadoes. And unfortunately, it feels like this film should have breaks. It needs to like slow down so that you can kind of get to know these characters and appreciate them, because it does not slow down one bit for it. Like, don't get me wrong, like, part of me loves seeing, like, Dr. Fate finally on the big screen and doing all this cool magic, and Hawkman wielding his mace that can absorb magic. That stuff was, like, really cool. But at the same time, there's zero introduction to this. So it's like, so as much as, like, I'm loving this, I know there's going to be someone sitting next to me who's going to be like, what the hell is happening here? Like, who's this Dr. Fate guy? Did, like, his helmet come from space? Why did that guy's mace transform? How did Atom Smasher get these abilities? More importantly, why is this, like, the second iteration of Atom Smasher? What happened with his father? There's all this stuff that could be explored, that could be interesting, but mostly gets sidelined. In particular, I feel really bad for Atom Smasher and Cyclone, because they're mostly just kind of looked down upon as, like, the interns of the Justice Society, and have, like, the briefest time to tell you their backstory. Like, they literally only have, like, about, like, a few seconds to get their backstory in between all the action that's going on here. And don't get me wrong, the action is actually pretty good. I actually really did like seeing Black Adam bust through walls and use his electric powers to zap Intergang, and then getting into fights with the Justice Society. All that stuff's pretty cool. But then it's one of those films that kind of, like, succumbs to, like, the superhero formula of realizing, look, when you get to the third act, you've got to have, like, everything come together with them fighting some big bad. And the villain they end up fighting is not all that interesting. It's just a demon called Sabak, who's summoned by this crown that was sought years ago. And, you know, one of the members of Intergang who was part of, like, the lineage of, like, the king who sought this crown finally puts it on, and he becomes a giant demon who Black Adam's got to fight. And the fight is not all that interesting, because it's not so much about outsmarting the demon or, you know, like, any character growth or anything like that. It's just a matter of, can Black Adam rip this guy in half? And I won't spoil it, but that's essentially all it amounts to. And it's a little bit frustrating, because here's the thing: if the film just wanted to be just, like, this mindless action piece of, you know, Black Adam fighting the Justice Society and then fighting a demon where they all team up together, it kind of works on that level, but it brings up all these more interesting aspects of, like, anti-imperialism, which, you know, does clash with what Amanda Waller was kind of, like, fighting for in the Suicide Squad. Here it kind of feels like the clunky version of, like, what James Gunn's Suicide Squad was doing with that aspect of, like, American exceptionalism. Here it's just kind of like, the Justice Society means well, and they're trying to do the right thing, but they're kind of working with Waller, because, like, okay, maybe Black Adam is violent, and we do kind of got to contain him and not really go too much against the grain, which is really troubling, because, like, the only reason that they decide to side with Black Adam and try to, you know, like, work with him and get on his good side is just because there's a bigger threat. There's another big bad on the horizon who doesn't really take its final form until, I guess, like, the end of the second act, right on time for the third act. So it's very concerning. Like, I mean, and the thing is, like, I really do like Dwayne Johnson in the role of Black Adam. He has the perfect kind of, like, fish out of water, dry wit. Like, it's pretty clear they're going for, like, a Terminator 2 vibe here, of having this character who doesn't understand, you know, after 5,000 years, you can't just go around killing people if you want to, you know, make the world better. Like, if you have all these powers, you don't have to kill them. So a little bit of a Terminator 2 edge there, but little aspects of that humor really works for this film. It's only when it's get lost in the weeds and doesn't give us enough time to expand on the characters that a lot of the character dynamic just kind of, it feels very artificial, where it doesn't come off like it should. It feels like there should be powerful moments between, like, Cyclone and Atom Smasher when they, you know, fear for their lives and what they're doing and question their place in the world, and it doesn't feel there. There are scenes where it's like there's a camaraderie between Dr. Fate and Hawkman where they're torn about sacrifice, and it feels like you should feel something more there, and it's just not there. It feels like there's a whole other film missing to kind of, like, blow up these characters and make us care more about them, instead of just being just nothing but superhero fights. Like, I think one of the reviews that I wrote for this was just, I think I just put in, like, the little subtitle, just, oops, all superhero fights. Because really that's that's kind of like the high point and the low point of the film. It's like, yes, you get lots of really cool superhero fights, and it is fun to see Black Adam like punch guys into the stratosphere. It's just that's kind of all you get, and by the time you see him like punch a man up into the clouds for like the fourth time, it kind of loses its impact. It's like, okay, this looks neat, but can you give me some meat here? Can you give me a little bit more to this story? And it almost kind of feels like that might have been part of like the runtime here. Like I think it's like right on the mark of like 2 hours, that it almost feels like something might have been trimmed out here, just because it should feel like there's a little bit more character here, but it feels like it was just get as much action in there as you can, get as much like, you know, chaos and destruction as you can. Although I should probably note, if you compare this to like Man of Steel, there's more superhero fights, and yet Kahndaq is still kind of in one piece, despite the fact that they're fighting a demon who literally summons the undead, and there's like cars toppling and zooming around, and there's energy explosions, and yet it still survives compared to Metropolis and Man of Steel. So, I mean, like, don't get me wrong, it's a better film than like Man of Steel or Batman v Superman, but mostly because it sets its sights lower. And I guess when it sets its sights lower, it doesn't feel as bad when it doesn't like kind of like measure up to like being a bigger film about talking about imperialism, and legacy and destiny, which are all great topics, but are all kind of reduced to like the smallest conversations before they got to get back to punching the undead or a demon or sending like the next villain back to hell or something like that. And the other thing that kind of concerned me here, and I know this is probably going to sound a little bit nitpicky here, and this is definitely the heaviest spoiler moment here, but at the end of the film, everyone was talking about this because they thought it was like, you know, this is the world we live in right now. It's like it's all about cameos, so like people mostly just come to the film and stay for it just to see what will happen in the next film. And at the end of the film, we get we get Henry Cavill returning as Superman. Now, immediately when that happens, most people in the theater will like cheer. They'll be like, "Oh yay!" And they'll clap. Cavill's back. Which, don't get me wrong, I love Cavill as Superman, but at the same time, I'm questioning this scene because, okay, Superman got called in to handle Black Adam by Amanda Waller. So my thoughts are like, so what is Superman working with Waller now? Like, they briefly mentioned in the Suicide Squad that Superman went to the ICU because of Deadshot. Did that have something to do with it? I don't know. There's so many great aspects of this film that don't feel like they pay off well. Like, it would feel interesting if they could explain a little bit why Superman's working with Amanda Waller. Instead, it's just it just ultimately amps up to, you know, who's Black Adam gonna fight next. Because, like, when I got to the end of that scene between Superman and Black Adam, it just felt like, okay, they're gonna meet and they're probably gonna fight, even though Superman says, like, we should probably talk. Like, they're probably gonna talk for a little bit and then just fight, right? I mean, that's that's the vibe that the whole film gives off here. So I'm very torn about the film. Like, on one level, it almost kind of feels like somebody like got like really, like a DC Comics fan got like really drunk, read through a whole bunch of JSA books and like read some of like the Black Adam stories and said, "Oh, I'm gonna make the most kick-ass film with like Black Adam and the Justice Society, and they're gonna fight in this town. We're gonna have Terminator 2 moments and all these cool little segments." I kind of admire the film on that level, but on another level, it's like, okay, but not all this connects. And by not connecting, I don't mean how it connects to like the DCEU. I really don't care how it connects. I really don't care that like Waller had the Justice Society in her pocket and didn't bring it out for Task Force X. That's fine. That's all fine. It's just that this film doesn't connect with everything that it's trying to set up, and a lot of, which is strange because it does set its goals really small, and I do like some of the stuff that it's doing, but it never really matches up to like the big film that it could have been, which is kind of sad. So instead of getting like this great DC Comics film, we kind of just get a decent one with some great ideas that are never really explored, and we mostly just explore how hard that Black Adam can punch someone, which is really hard. Big surprise, huh? So Black Adam is currently playing in theaters. I think it's doing all right. I think it did like 60 million over the weekend. It'll probably be on home video by like January, but I imagine it'll probably be on HBO Max by probably December at this rate. It might be sooner. Like if Warner Brothers really wants to get people watching HBO Max over Thanksgiving, they might push it out by then. We'll see. So yeah, mixed review on Black Adam. All right. Well, now that we're getting to Halloween season, why don't we just go straight into Halloween Ends? Get a little Halloween before it ends here. Let me get the notes up here, so you can all watch me struggle again to pronounce the names here. What's it? Andy Matichak. Like I said, terrible pronunciation. Okay, so here we go. The review of Halloween Ends in 3, 2, 1. So Halloween Ends is the final film in the David Gordon Green Halloween trilogy, which is itself a sequel to the first Halloween film. And here's the thing. Halloween Ends is very much going to be a polarizing film. I doubt there's going to be much like fence sitting on this film, because here's the thing. This film takes some very daring and bold choices that you are either going to love. It's going to like explore areas that Halloween has never gone before, and it's going to be very fascinating and interesting to explore this dynamic. Or you could just be that guy who says, oh man, there wasn't enough Michael Myers in this film. Didn't do much. Because really that's one of the bigger criticisms here. Even though, I mean, come on, this is Halloween. We've had a Halloween film, Season of the Witch, where Michael Myers is literally not in the entire narrative at all. So the idea that we're getting less Michael Myers, you still get more Michael Myers in this film than you would in Season of the Witch. So there's that. So here's the thing. I love how this film kind of like approaches Michael Myers more as an evil force over Haddonfield, rather than just being like, the killer goes around and slashing everyone up again. Because we've already kind of got that with the last two films. Like in 2018's Halloween, we got to see, Michael Myers finally escape, and Laurie Strode, played by Jamie Lee Curtis, finally get her revenge and kind of like come to terms with their trauma. And then Halloween Kills from last year kind of missed the mark, because I kind of dig what the film is trying to do. It's trying to like give people, set up like set up Haddonfield as this town where everyone wants revenge on Michael Myers, and that revenge does not, satisfy the soul and doesn't give you the closure that you wanted. Like revenge is messy, and it destroys you more than anything else, and it literally does destroy the survivors at the end of Halloween Kills. I did feel like they kind of misfired a little bit there by essentially, like, midway in Halloween Kills, there's a moment where the victims who have resorted to like mob violence kind of realizes, oh, maybe we're not doing the right thing, and they just kind of go back to still doing a terrible thing, which I still maintain that's my least favorite film in this Halloween trilogy, especially because the whole film is just, Laurie talking about how she needs to be the one to kill Michael, and that evil will die tonight and all that. And thankfully, Halloween Ends takes a much different route. For one, it's got a little bit of a time skip here. So Halloween and Halloween Kills, the last two films, they all took place on Halloween night in 2018. This film starts in the Halloween of 2019. So Michael Myers has basically been on the loose, and nobody knows where he is, but everyone is kind of in fear that he'll strike again. And this fear causes the teenager Corey, played by Rohan Campbell, to basically grow paranoid, and his paranoia ultimately leads to someone being murdered by accident. So, he didn't mean to kill, but it happened. And so we follow with him a few Halloweens later, where he is basically trying to get his life back together, despite the fact that everyone blames him for the murder. So basically, everyone in Haddonfield sees him as the new Michael Myers. And it feels like the only person who can kind of sympathize with him is Laurie Strode, played by Jamie Lee Curtis again. Like she's fought Michael Myers, she's seen evil, and she recognizes, how people try to, how people like try to deal with tragedy and how they try to live their life through it. And it's kind of interesting to see Laurie in this angle because she seems to have kind of moved on a little bit. She's trying to like get her life together again. Like she doesn't feel like the paranoid grandma who's in her house lying in wait with a shotgun and traps, just like, Michael Myers is still out there, I'm gonna get him, no. Now she's actually kind of like the fun grandma who bakes pies for her granddaughter and talks way openly about sex than you'd expect, and she's flirting with a local police officer in town, and they have a cute dynamic. So for like a little bit of like the first act of the film, you get to see Laurie kind of having a little bit of the happy ending she wants. At the same time, though, I like how the rest of Haddonfield doesn't like let it go about what Laurie has experienced, and kind of, and basically the rest of the town feeling that she's a little bit responsible for what happened with Michael Myers. So every now and then when it feels like Laurie is having a good day, or it feels like everything's going right, that she's coming to terms with their demons, there's that reminder that just shuts her down immediately, just sends her back home, like locking the doors and drinking herself into forgetting about it again. But she's trying, she's trying to live her best life. She's, she's writing her own little memoir about having survived Michael Myers. So she's getting her life together. So it's interesting to see Laurie kind of be faced with someone like Corey, because it's this interesting element to explore of how like survivors can get their life together and try to, move on. But at the same time, question, can they prevent it from happening again if they've tackled this challenge? And it's a thing that Laurie can't quite do. Like, it feels like her granddaughter, Allison, played by Andy Matichak, seems to be on that route because Allison takes a liking to Corey. And they actually hit it off really well. They have like a little bit of a cute romance going. But just like with Laurie, Corey kept getting reminded of the past. Haddonfield won't let it go. Like they'll hound him, they'll harass him, they'll bully him. And some of them will just physically assault him and, come pretty close to killing him. So Corey ends up going down this darker and darker pit when eventually he more or less becomes like the new Michael Myers of the town, realizing that, if this town hates me, if they need me to be their new boogeyman, then fine. I'll be the new boogeyman. And it's an aspect that, it troubles Corey, but it's something that also that Allison can kind of understand as well, because she's also, in a similar sense, being targeted the same way that Laurie is. So there's this interesting dynamic between all of them of trying to move on and not being able to, and still finding that the road to recovery is a lot harder. Even when it seems like you found happiness, it still feels like there's more to work for. But where's Michael Myers in all this? Where's Sir Michael? Michael Myers eventually comes up in the second act, and I like the fact that Michael is kind of more of like an inspiration for Corey more than anything else. Like, he represents this evil temptation that draws Corey in. Michael Myers, the mute masked man with with any blunt object or knife to slash someone, won't judge Corey. He'll give him the tools to like do revenge, whereas Laurie tries and struggles to find the right words to bring him back, to the side of basically good. And most of it kind of works. Like, I will admit, there are a lot of scenes here that fall flat. They're set up well, and I love their intentions and the thematic layering over them. But I will admit that there are a lot of scenes that don't work as well as they should, and it's kind of a shame because it really kind of like takes you out of the film, and it feels like it's being a little bit like not even like tongue-in-cheeky, but kind of like unintentionally humorous at times, for moments where it feels like it's exploring something a lot deeper that just doesn't bubble up the same way that you would hope. That being said, once you get to like the kills in the third act, there's some pretty quality kills. I really like them. There's scenes where people get stabbed repeatedly in very brutal ways. There's scenes where people's heads get crushed in, or someone else's head gets melted by fire. And definitely the most grotesque kill in the film. I will not spoil, but if you've seen it, you know what one I'm talking about. It's the kill at the radio station, which it involves a radio DJ, a vinyl player, his tongue, and a pair of shears. That's all I will say. And if you've seen the scene, you know what it is. Even if you haven't, your imagination can probably guess where that scene is going. So it's interesting how like the film kind of goes down that darker thematic route, but then once it gets to like more of like the kills, because up until like Corey's killing spree in the third act, the second act keeps the kills like very very simple but brutal. It's mostly just like stabbings and slashings, like almost kind of like very tactile kills. The way that Corey is kind of learning the ropes. And then of course eventually in the third act, you know, he becomes Michael Myers and just he grows up so fast. Is probably what Michael Myers would say. And I find the film so fascinating because it's very messy in how it's trying to interpret, you know, recovery and what Michael Myers represents as this evil force that Haddonfield and Laurie mostly is trying to get over. And it's an interesting theme to explore. I feel like it kind of gets lost in the third act, though. Not just because of the kills, but more because of what Michael Myers represents in like the final showdown between him and Laurie, where it becomes more about, you know, you need help from other people to survive. So like I guess on like kind of like a broader scale, the themes really work towards the end of the film in terms of in terms of like, you know, killing Michael Myers. But here's the thing. It's a film where you kind of have to think about it for a little bit just to, you know, piece it together correctly. Because for most of the film, it's just kind of like, there are so many like scenes that fall flat, and there's also scenes that kind of like play into like a little too much to the grotesque nature of like Michael Myers' kills and basically his immortality that kind of makes the film get a little bit off track. Not fully off track, but it's like, okay, this is getting too goofy. Because look, it's a slasher film. You got to have like some fun with the kills. Like if you're going to have any fun with this material, that would probably be the area where you'd want to do it. But some of it falls flat, and I don't really blame the actors so much. Like I really love everyone here. Like Rowan Campbell does a fantastic job as Corey. Jamie Lee Curtis is a lot of fun still as Laurie. Even Andy Matichak does a great job, and Will Patton as the sorry, I said officer. He's a deputy. Even him, like he does, they have fine performances, all of them. It's just mostly, I feel it's mostly like the scenes and how they're set up, and kind of like how there's maybe a wee bit of like a tonal whiplash between certain scenes that don't quite make it the great film that it could have been. So like I was a little bit on the fence here, but I feel like the more I think about Halloween Ends, the more I love it. And especially for what it's trying to do. I absolutely adore that it's trying to present Michael Myers more as this temptation of evil that has to be challenged, and that it's a challenge that isn't easy to meet. In the same way that Michael Myers is not a villain that's easy to kill. The thing is, though, it's not built for the audience who. It's not quite built for the same audience who like loved Halloween Kills, which was just nothing but crazy kills the whole time. Just Michael Myers is on the loose. We got to stop him. We can't stop him. He's an indestructible machine. Kill, kill, kill. Oh man, gory deaths, funny deaths. Like I don't know if you remember, there was that death where someone was trying to shoot him and accidentally shot themselves in the head because of a car door, which is a bizarre moment. So if you're looking for that type of film, you might not get it here, unless you're patient enough to sit through like a greater exploration of evil before it gets to all the kind of campy kills in the third act. So it's a very conflicting film. Like it feels like it wants to have its cake and eat it too. It wants to be a little bit of like a more high-minded horror film, but still have all like the fun slasher elements. And for being that daring, I gotta admit, David Gordon Green does a really good job with this material here. I do feel like like I said, it gets a little bit lost here just because I think there's 4 writers on this film as opposed to the last 2, which had only 3. And it kind of feels like there is some conflicting messages here and there throughout the narrative. But like I said, the more I thought about this film, the more I love it. And I feel like over time, I feel like the reactionaries are just like immediately, there was enough Michael Myers. I don't like the film. Or I don't know why we focus on Corey, like negating that Corey is taking inspiration from Michael Myers, but whatever. But I feel like, yeah, over time, I feel like this is going to be a film that people appreciate a lot more. And it's definitely going to be one of the better Halloween films, especially for just the bigger themes to explore here. I feel really, really work for this entry. So, Halloween Ends, I believe is still playing in theaters. If you can't catch it there, I believe it's still on Peacock. I think it might be there for a while. I'm not quite sure. Like, Peacock is still doing that thing where they release films in theaters and on their streaming service for a little while. I think it might be there for a little while and then return soon, but it'll probably be back on Peacock in like January, if not. Let's see. Hey, how you doing, babe? How you doing, freaky, spooky movie girl? Interesting names. How y'all doing? If you're just joining us, we just reviewed Black Adam, a middling DC Comics film. Mostly good fights, but like a little bit of a lacking script here, for as much as I love the Justice Society in it. We also reviewed Halloween Ends, as you just saw, which is I dare say it's my second favorite of the David Gordon Green Halloween saga. The original film, the original 2018 film, still the best entry of that saga. Of course, I mean Halloween in general with all the Halloween films. Obviously, the best film in the Halloween series is Halloween 3, The Season of the Witch. I'm sorry, I don't make the rules. I can't help but love a film that uses Stonehenge and robots and Halloween masks that make bugs come out of kids' heads. I'm sorry, but that's the best film, you know? All right, all doing good? All right. I'm tempted to maybe should yeah, let's just do Hellraiser. Let's keep the Halloween theme going here with a little bit of Hellraiser, huh? All right, let me get up my notes here since I'm terrible with pronunciation. Okay. Let's see, David Buckner's new film of Hellraiser. I feel like I have to put the date on there, otherwise people are going to be confused. Like, which Hellraiser are we talking about? All right. So here we go in 3, 2, 1. So Hellraiser, the new Hellraiser, not the original. This is the 2002 remake. But here's the thing. A lot of horror remakes of, franchises, they tend to kind of like lose their way. It feels like they're just repeating the same stuff and not exploring anything new and giving any, basically like taking the series in a new direction. And it felt like this Hellraiser film could do that, since it's just called Hellraiser. But sometimes that doesn't happen with the horror saga. Sometimes a horror franchise can be taken in from the cold, dust off, look at all its like sequels and say, oh man, you're in bad shape here. We gotta dust you off and get you back to your roots. And that's exactly what David Buckner does with his new Hellraiser film. This is everything that kind of like that the original story by Clive Barker kind of had to be. Hellraiser was all about, having like this deeper contemplation on, like the limits of the human body, the existential crisis of the soul, dabbling into like pain and pleasure and all that. And just being just flat out gross. Like if you remember like the original film, it was pretty damn gory if you remember the first kill of that film. And thankfully, this Hellraiser's on the same level. It's the similar premise. There's a mysterious puzzle box, and people are intrigued by it. They try to solve it, and once they kind of solve it, there's a price paid of blood, and out come the Cenobites these mysterious beings from another dimension that basically torture and rip apart bodies and souls and show you unknown terrors. Basically, they're probably like the creepiest horror villains you'd ever want to run into, just because, you know, like some like slasher villains, you know, they might toy with you for a little bit, and they might like gut you and kill you instantly. The Cenobites won't let that happen. The Cenobites will torture you. They will let your pain linger long and hard, and it will be horrifying and grotesque. And that happens immediately. Like very quickly in the film, we're introduced to this rich socialite. I'm trying to remember. I think his name was like Roland Vought. Oh yeah, he's played by Goran Vinicic. I believe I'm pronouncing his name correctly. Who basically has this little puzzle box, and he invites over a male prostitute, and he looks at it and he thinks like, oh, what is this box? Do I get a prize if I open it? It's like, well, I will. You can dick around with it if you want. And so he plays with the box, and then eventually, you know, kind of solves it, gets stabbed in the hand, and out come the Cenobites. Out come the chains, and out come the hooks, and ripping the flesh apart in a grotesque manner, and it's a perfect way to start off the film. So later, kind of intrigued by this is Riley McKendry, played by Odessa Asian. And she is a recovering drug addict. She resides with other people who are trying to get their life together, but she's struggling to kind of like stay on the wagon. She's starting to form romances with other addicts, and she can't quite get her life together. And then she discovers the puzzle box and thinks, oh, wow, this is kind of neat. What's going on with this? And eventually she does meet the Cenobites, including the lead Cenobite of Pinhead, or I guess you want to call it like the Hell Priest, played by Jamie Clayton. And the Hell Priest basically says like, hey, you know, I can show you some pretty cool crap if you sacrifice some souls. And if you don't sacrifice some souls, I'm going to take your soul and rip it apart, you know, as the classic Hellraiser would say. And the thing is, I really like Jamie Clayton's portrayal of the Hell Priest, just because she has like a little bit of like a deep, sultry voice that brings a bit more of like eroticism to the character, especially since like the other Cenobites have like this wee bit of like a like erotic nature to them, and how they like dabble in all like the pains and the flesh of the spirit, and she does a masterful performance, just creeping you out anytime she's on screen, when the way she stares at you with those dead eyes, and when she wants to torture you, she'll like pull the pin right out of her head right here, and then, oh my god, I'll briefly say this, one of the grossest kills in the film, not even the kills, one of the grossest tortures, is when she takes the pin from her head, and there's a really grotesque close-up of like someone's ear canal getting the pin being shoved right through there. And oh god, it is so creepy, and it gets under your skin. Like, and I appreciate that about a horror film, because like it feels like so many horror films kind of go on like autopilot and don't feel like they kind of like creep you out and disgust you. So I always appreciate when a horror film can do that. I got that a little bit this year with like Crimes of the Future, and here I definitely got more of that with that scene, especially with how the rest of that scene occurs, because this one woman basically just gets torn to shreds, and it's gross. It is absolutely gross, and that's kind of what you want out of a Hellraiser film. You want it to be sick and disgusting and gross, but also feel like it's about something more than that, because I know I'm selling it on all like the gross out kills and all that, because that stuff is pretty fun, but in a weird, bizarre way. But on another level, I like the fact that how Roland Vought is kind of using the Cenobites to attain something more. So the film is definitely about greed, not just of money, but of like the human spirit. Because the whole thing with like Roland Vought is that he wanted immortality, and he kind of got it from the Cenobites in a weird way. He got this bizarre contraption that kind of looks like a machine has entered his body and kind of like twists his intestines and veins around, and it's it's nasty and gory, but he decides like, oh, I want more than that. He doesn't just want like immortality now he's taunted by saying like, I want kind of more what you have. I want to go where you've been. I want to see what you've seen. I want more pleasure. Basically it amounts to like he wants more out of life, which is a very kind of like human trait. We're always seeking like the next mountain to climb, the next challenge, and I like the fact that like Roland's whole plan is that he's going to trap the Cenobites. Like he essentially leads this band of drug addicts who have the puzzle box back to his place, which he's built as this huge Cenobite trap of a mansion. So it's kind of like David Gordon Green's Halloween, in a sense of that it's a little bit of like a house. There's no like Home Alone elements where there's like goofy like trap door like spike traps or stuff like that. It's just mostly just like trap doors and stuff like that, saying, "Ha, gotcha." So now Cenobites, you gonna give me something cool? and they kind of do. I was actually very fascinated with how this film ends by basically Roland's greed being fulfilled, but in a bizarre and very surreal manner that it's hard to describe. It's one of those things where it's kind of like you kind of got to sit with it a while and try to like figure out what exactly did Roland attain, and did it bring him happiness? Because ultimately it feels like he was kind of just shedding more of his flesh, but after that he's done that there's something that exists beyond that, like a greater pleasure that can, not just basically experiencing the same thing that the Cenobites feel, and how they believe that they know more that's beyond our reality than the simple pleasures of our own. Which creates an interesting dynamic with how like the drug addicts are addicted to their vices and kind of trapped within there, and like with Roland and his greed. So there's all these great little parallels here. I will say that the first act of this film is very slow. It proceeds at a little bit of a slow pace just because we got to establish Riley and a few other characters just so that we can get to know and like them a bit before like, the Cenobites start coming forward and torturing them in the most grotesque way possible, like I've mentioned all the ways before. But once it gets to that moment where Riley opens up the puzzle box and you start seeing reality shift, you get all these like cool effects of like the walls kind of like come apart and like they turn into like these weird kind of like they basically like turn into cubes and basically like fall back and push things to the side and change the lighting, and just all of like these sets are like so great to look at. And yeah, like the whole staging is just gross and bizarre and surreal, and the greater themes of tapping into greed and vice and existentialism are all work so well here that I think like it's kind of like neck and neck with like the first Hellraiser film for me. And the thing I love most about this film is that it doesn't establish a clear canon. Like, For all we know, this could be a sequel. It could be a reboot. It could be a remake. It doesn't matter. it literally doesn't matter. All you need to know is that the Cenobites are back. There's a puzzle box. And, there's Cenobites running around killing people and torturing them in the most grotesque way. And it works so well on that level. So however you want to label this, as a remake, reboot, sequel, spin-off... Probably not spin-off. It just works so well here, and Jamie Clayton makes an amazing Hell Priest. What a wonderful film. So yeah, the new Hellraiser is currently playing on Hulu. Definitely go check that out. Read some of the chat here. Freaky Spooky Movie Girl says, "Are you excited for Cabin in the Woods, or do you care less? I told my friend I care less." Cabin in the Wood. That sounds familiar. Is that I know it's not. I know it's not the Josh Whedon film like Cabin in the Woods. I know there's like another film regarding. I'm trying to remember. I don't think it's called Cabin in the Woods though, is it? There is some film that takes place in a cabin in the woods. Um, but what's it called? It's on the tip of my tongue. I think I know the film you're talking about. If you mean the cabin in the woods film that came out like a decade ago, I mean that's still a fun film. I still like that film. I remember seeing the trailer for that film where it takes place at I believe it's like the fall of civilization, and like there's people in the woods and like a cabin. It's on the. It looked okay for me. Knock on the cabin door. That's it, I believe. Let me double check. Oh, Knock at the Cabin. That's the one. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I remember the trailer for this, and I remember thinking, you know, this could work. It could kind of be in like the same vein as oh, now I don't want to screw up this title either. It's a long one. It Comes at Night. I really like that. I know a lot of people didn't like it because it's a little bit ambiguous with its themes. But I did like it's kind of like, riding out the apocalypse in a cabin and letting paranoia take over you. And I feel like if that aspect is explored with like the psychological horror of, Knock on the Cabin Door, it could work. And I kind of saw a little bit of that in the trailer. So I'm open to it. I mean, I'm pretty much open to most horror films, so why not? Like, I mean, it's definitely not an original premise. It's definitely been done, and I'm probably, if I do see that film, I'm probably going to compare it to It Comes at Night. It's just going to happen. Been listening on the drive home. I really like the Halloween Ends, but I get why people feel thrown by it. The first two have such escalating moments that it feels dropped, like we skipped over 3 and now 4. But it's a good character piece, a good slasher, and a good riff on Carpenter's Christine. Yeah, there's a few good inspirational moments in there. I think like it came out too that like Carpenter did see Halloween Ends, and basically just said, yeah, I love it. I'm glad. You could have just been saying it so that he could get another paycheck for. So like for those who don't know, like Carpenter has been asked what he thinks of the Halloween films. He's basically saying, I don't care. I get paid. If they want to make more of them, sure of it. I'll get another paycheck. So I don't know if this is just him saying that for another paycheck. He might be, which is fine. But he seemed to dig it. He showed some love for Jamie Lee Curtis, so. Yeah, it's deeply polarizing right now, but I think after some time goes by and the reactionaries die down, there are going to be people who are going to come back and reassess this film. And I think they are going to love it. I think they are. Yeah. All right, so covered all the semi-big films. Let's cover a more recent film. Let's talk about Tar. Which, not a horror film. This doesn't involve people being drowned in tar, but would be a cool film, Okay, let me get my notes up here so I don't mispronounce anyone's names. All right, in 3, 2, 1. So Tar is the latest film by director Todd Field, and it is all about a composer by the name of Lydia Tarr. She's played by Cate Blanchett, who does a masterful performance here, playing this, like a little bit of like a stuffy composer who's very much full of herself. They establish her as this woman who's accomplished a lot in her career. She's won many awards. She's been highly praised for her works in composing classical music. She's very astute, as the opening interview in the film reveals. But she's not the best with most people. She doesn't quite handle criticism well, and she's got a lot of skeletons in her closet. So yeah, you can kind of see where this film is going. And in fact, there's a moment where you can tell exactly what this film is trying to do. In one of like the earlier scenes, which is I feel like is one of the best shot scenes. So there's a scene where Tar is, I guess it feels weird to say, Lydia. There's a scene where Lydia is teaching a class on music, and she's bringing up, different ways to compose, and recommends that one of her students try to check out Bach. And the student basically says, I don't know if I can be into Bach. I don't really like his history. I don't really like the guy. I don't know if I want to get into his music. And basically Lydia sees this as a challenge. Just basically argue that you have to put art over the artist. And basically kind of like forces him on the spot to say like, well, you wouldn't like to be judged or anything, so who are you to say? And the scene comes to a close when the student basically says, you know what, you're a fucking bitch. Just tells that right to her face. And Lydia's response is, well, you're a robot who can't have human feelings, and you just, go with the flow, and you do whatever social media tells you to. And of course, you can tell what's happening here. You can see that this is Lydia priming the pump because she's scared. She knows that there is a dark cloud looming over her career, involving sexual abuse with one of her former players, a younger player. That's what would happen. And I like how the film slowly reveals this. Like, we only see it mostly through like Lydia's paranoia and kind of like checking over her shoulder and having nightmares about being called out by different people. And they're very subtle. And the way that it slowly builds up as like she's trying to work new players into her orchestra while her life slowly, bit by bit, falls apart. And it's a little bit of like a rise and fall film, and then it has like a fourth act which reserves for Lydia trying to learn and trying to find a way to build herself up. And it's a fascinating film. Like for a film that's mostly about cancel culture, it's very interesting how it approaches this. Like it doesn't go for it doesn't really focus on social media that much. It mostly focuses on Lydia and how she interacts with people, how she handles controversy, and how she conflicts with other people. This is most evident with her assistant, Francesca, played by Noemi Merlant. And she's basically like, Francesca is kind of trying to work her way up the ladder. Like, she's trying to say everything that Lydia wants, be there for her, do everything that she needs, and hopefully maybe one day climb up to a higher spot in her orchestra. And that doesn't happen because she's easily replaced by, the next, younger prodigy who comes along. And of course you can immediately suspect something's wrong here. She's taking way too much of an interest in the younger crowd. And even what I find is fascinating is even when she is taking an interest in this younger Russian cello player, there are still moments that aggravate her, that basically let her know that her time is up and that things are changing and that she can't adapt. And it's basically the way that the cellist kind of like controls herself and says that, I listened to this composer and I got inspired by this music. And then he's like, oh, well, where did you hear their music? Which record did you listen to? And the cellist is basically, oh, I just listened to it on YouTube. I listened to a few tracks on YouTube and then I played it and then, now I'm good. And it's one of those things that's like, it's kind of hard for Lydia to accept this, because it feels like she's trapped in like this past of like other people who have kind of like decayed with their dreams. So like, perfect example of this is like a character she meets a few times is Elliot, who's an investment banker and conductor who hasn't quite amounted the guts to kind of like, become as great a composer as Lydia. And like, they have only a few exchanges, but you can tell that Lydia's like, this is not going to happen to me. I'm not going to end up like my buddy here. And then she interacts with like other retired conductors and older members of her group, and basically tries to like basically maintain control. Like, she wants to have final say where she can shut out people, go over people's heads and fire them without their knowledge. So when this all comes to bite her back, it's it happens so quick that you're almost kind of like astounded how quickly it mounts. Especially because like there's a suicide involved. There's this fear that she's being spied on. There's all these little terrors in her life that by the time it gets to the point where there's like a doctored video of her trying to like prove her, try to make her look even worse. Like, it's clearly, faked. And most of like the conducting crew, the people within like the orchestra community can see that. But even still, like, it's just kind of like the cherry on top of like everything that's gone wrong with Lydia's life here. That it's interesting to just watch her fall. And I love the fact that the film sticks with her throughout this. Like, there's rarely a moment where we leave Lydia's perspective. We're with her through this entire film, so we get to see everything that she sees and hears and feels, where even when it feels like she's composed and she has like great humor about her and that she can conduct herself well among people, she's highly unstable, in private. And to see that kind of like slowly bubble up and really explode in one sequence where she storms into like a conducting session that she was fired from, it's so extreme. That it's fascinating to just like watch Cate Blanchett play this role where she's building this character up more and more and more to fall. And then when she finally does fall, like it's fascinating watching her kind of get back to her roots and try to find another gig and try to figure out what she loved about music beforehand, but also realize that there's a part of this culture of like, having power over people that she did not consider and comes back to bite her in the worst way. So yeah, it's very much a fall from grace, and it's surprising how this film manages to balance this little tiny bits of like dark humor here and there with just this almost kind of like surreal drama at times for like the fascinating directions that it goes into. Like there's an entire sequence where she's just running down a dark hallway, fearful that someone's after her, someone's over her shoulder, and we never quite see who it is. And there's so many more moments where she's always like, she goes out for runs all the time and she feels like there's someone behind her. There's someone just waiting for her to fall and stuff like that. That it's just like, it's great that it never like fully like pays off. Like there actually is someone behind her. Like it's all just these elements in her head that keep growing and festering that ultimately bring about the end of her career. And it's just like the way it's shot, like all like the different scenes of, like the theater and her, her stylish household. Also, she has an interesting dynamic with her family, which I felt was kind of interesting. Her with her wife and her child, who both have specific ailments. Like her wife has to, is basically sickly and kind of like needs surgeries, while her daughter has this problem with she can't quite get to sleep because there's like a twitch within her, like her foot. All these like small little mannerisms that create all these little details in her life. It's just like there's such attention to every little aspect of Lydia's life, and it proceeds so like, this film is like, it's almost 3 hours long and it's edited so perfectly. Like there rarely feels like a moment where it's like it's wasting time, where it's like even scenes that are like trips to like where she like jettisons off to like New York and travels back and forth from Germany and conducts at like the separate apartment and has to go back and forth towards the theater to arrange everything. It cuts so quick between all that. Like her stop in New York where she briefly considers, more or less considers having sex with her cellist, but is still kind of like paranoid about, being discovered and what it's going to mean for her career. That sequence is so quick. It's so fast within it. And like, there's so many great little moments that we get to linger on. Like, Lydia at one point is confronted by a neighbor who asks for help and can't get it. And it ultimately ends to a dark end. Which is kind of like a little bit of like a side plot on the side, which kind of contributes to her overall perspective of the world. So there's so much to explore here, but all you really need to know is that it's a amazing performance by Kate Blanchett. This is probably one of my favorite performances of her, just because it's so multifaceted that she has to be this very, very like kind of like chipper and like accomplished composer, but also someone that you can't really trust. She does such a great job here, and I think you're probably definitely going to see her come up towards awards time, because I really do feel like this is one of, if not the best, then one of the best performances of her career. So yeah, I really love Tar. So Tar should currently be playing in theaters right now. I believe I believe it's in limited release right now, and it should be expanding. And it should be expanding like a little bit more next weekend, I think. It should be playing in most theaters right now. Yeah. So, and you're definitely going to see it come awards time here. Oh, shoot. Hang on. That closed. Give me one moment here. Okay. There we go. Sorry, I lost my notes there. Hey, how you doing there, Jello Flubber Fart? How do you guys tell? Definitely the weirdest name I've seen on this stream, man. All right. So we got one more film to get to, and this is one of the newest films that we've got to review. This is Armageddon Time, which is opening not this week, but next week in most outlets. I think it's going to be in limited release this weekend and then expand more into the next week. Just saw it today, so fresh review, fresh off the presses here. All right, let's see. Get my notes up here. All right, and here we go in 3, 2, 1. So Armageddon Time is a 1980 drama by James Gray, which is probably one of the most gut-wrenching but also like hopeful films that I think I've seen this year. Just because this film really got to me. I was surprised how much this movie worked its magic on me for what could have been just kind of like what could have just been like a simple exercise in melodrama. It actually turned out to be rather surprising and have a lot of spirit to it. So the premise of the film is that it takes place in 1980 in New York. And this, I believe he's like a preteen called Paul Graff, is basically struggling in school. He's in a new public school. His Jewish family is a little bit hesitant about him going there. They fear that he's not going to be successful in life. They fear that, the pressures of society are going to come down upon him and basically ruin his life. So there's a mixture of both like fear and love that they have for him, but it's also a very a very troubling time in that era. Paul, played by Banks Rapetta, I believe his name is. Great kid actor here. Absolutely love his performance. And I love how this film has this very like lived in aspect where it doesn't feel like it's meandering too much, like it's getting to all the key beats, but there's also like different dimensions that we get to see of the character. Like it's not just that Paul has like a terrible relationship with his father. It's that his father is fearful and also damaged. Like there are moments where we get to see him as kind of like a playful guy, the way he tries to like get his kids up in the morning by banging pots and dancing around them. You kind of love him on that aspect. And then there are moments where like when he finds out that Paul's been smoking weed, he beats him. And it is shocking and sad and depressing. And then you get other scenes where like, basically like Paul's father, Irving Graff, played by Jeremy Strong, who does an amazing job here, just kind of melting into this role, is a very like conflicted soul who's worried for Paul, but also, is kind of had like a troubling life for himself. So you can feel like it always feels like the family is trying to do what's best for Paul, but that they don't quite have the tools to give him everything that he needs to grow up, which is explored so perfectly in the film. It's a little bit of like a spoiler, but towards the end of the film, Irving actually talks with Paul and says, look, in this, like, there's a very dangerous situation towards the end of the film where Irving says, look, Paul, you got lucky. You're not going to be that lucky in life. We don't have that kind of luck, and life is going to be unfair. And, you kind of got to try to find a better life, and it's not going to be easy. But who ends up becoming the biggest inspiration of Paul's life is his grandpa, Aaron, played by Anthony Hopkins. And is it any surprise that Hopkins is just a lot of fun in this film, especially because it's not just that Hopkins has a great performance here, he does, but the character he plays is an aged soul who kind of feels like he has way more insight to give than Paul's parents do. And this is because as Aaron reveals, he has seen he has seen like the terrors of like Nazis and persecution and anti-Semitism and racists. He's seen it all. And so he realizes that, that this isn't going to work for Paul. That, he can't just stand idly by. There's a great moment in the trailer where Hopkins' character basically like looks at Paul and says like, how's school? And Paul says like, well, like, some of my classmates, they said a racially insensitive word and I don't know if I liked it. And Hopkins is like, well, what'd you do about it? And Paul's like, oh, well, I didn't do anything. It's like, oh, do you think that was the right thing to do? And the trailer kind of leaves it there as like a topic to explore. But Aaron immediately gives the answer to that question where he says like, I'll tell you what, that wasn't the right thing to do. And it's like, and there's this great little monologue where he basically says, these people who say these horrible things about black people, they're going to say horrible things about you too. And they're going to stab you in the back. And they're going to be cruel, hateful people who will just make the world awful. And literally just says, fuck them. It was such a great moment of hope because like it comes at a time where you can sense that something very deeply sad and terrible is going to happen with this family. And it comes at just the right moment where basically Hopkins' character basically says like, yeah, all those people who are saying racist stuff in your neighborhood, fuck them. That's and he says, yes, I said a bad word. I'm your grandpa, whatever. And that's, I think, like the best way to describe the film is that it's these moments of both like tragedy and hope, and they punch you so hard. They are, oh my God, like it's a combination, I think, of just like the crisp writing that Gray has here for like making very multifaceted characters who you learn to like and love over the course of this film. And the fine performances where it kind of like shocks you, but it feels believable. In particular, I really liked Anne Hathaway as Paul's mother, Esther, who has a playful side to her, but also a deeply emotional side, which just sends her into fits of depression where there are aspects where she feels like she can't control her life. And at the same time, much like with Paul's father, there are very charming, playful moments where she tries to, even in very tense moments, she tries to find little bits of humor, which is not uncommon for a family that tries to stick together and tries to do what's right. So you have these where it doesn't just feel like Paul's family is the worst. Where even when Paul feels that way, feels like I got to get away from my family. They're nutty. They have backwards ideas. They can't help me. They are not giving me everything I need to grow up. And at the same time, you can tell they're trying. You can tell that they're not good at this, but they're trying, and they're trying so hard that you start to feel for them, even when they do these terrible things that you feel like would be unforgivable. Like with Irving, beating up on Paul, that's a heartbreaking moment, and you soon realize that it's just he's ill prepared. He can't handle getting used to this life. The other standout kid actor right next to Banks Ripida is oh god, I forgot his friend's name, but he has a black friend, and they connect because they both realize that they can't, they realize their parents can't help them. His friend is called Johnny, who's played by Jalen Webb, and Johnny basically he realizes that his life is screwed. He knows that his parents are out of the picture, his grandma can't help him, Child Protective Services are going to take him away soon. He realizes all this. So he rebels early, and he just tells the teacher to screw off. I know you're not going to help me. I know I've been held back, and I know no one is going to be there for me. So I'm just going to be there for myself. So of course, Paul immediately gravitates towards this kid because it feels like he has his life together. He knows where he's going. He knows what he wants to do, even though he doesn't. He doesn't know where he's going to spend the next night. He doesn't know what his future is going to be. But Paul gets this kid, and they get each other. So they form this really kind of tragic friendship that takes place over the course of this fall school year that doesn't, without revealing too much, it does not go well for them. And so you're left with this kind of this somber, but almost kind of wee bit of hope, where you hope that Paul learns from this and learns that the American dream that his folks believed that they could have, which they bring up a few times, especially Anthony Hopkins' character, that it's not something that's going to be that easy to attain, and that it's not going to be what you thought it was going to be, and that it is going to be unfair. This is particularly true because, as a little bit of a surprise in this film, John Deal shows up at Paul's prep school when he gets taken out of public school for smoking weed, and he gets forced into prep school, and the school has the school gets a lecture from John Deal, who's playing Fred Trump, and he looks quite like him. And then in another creative bit of casting, you get Jessica Chastain playing Mary Ann Trump, and they basically give the speech that kind of boils your blood, where they say hey, I didn't get any handouts. I built myself up from, they don't quite say the part where it's just oh yeah, I was born into wealth, but I built myself up, and you got to pull yourself up by the bootstraps. And yeah, at a prep school where which is just, it boils your blood. And even it gets to a point when Paul hears the speech for the second time, even he realizes, yeah, these people are full of shit and they don't know what they're talking about, and I've got to do better, and I don't know how I'm going to do it, but I can't be like these people, and I've got to make the world a better place. So there's so many sad moments here. There's an unfortunate death, there's a wrongful arrest, there's someone who gets beat up, there's racism, there's anti-Semitism that's addressed. But it's addressed in this way that doesn't, it doesn't feel like a Green Book way where it's trying to say like, here's like the simple happy answer to it, like, oh, here's like the easy to spot racist. Like there's no like goofy over the top racist here where someone can just sit there in the theater and say, oh well, good thing I'm not that guy. No, they're very like, like they feel like more real, like like common people who like occasionally now and then will just let racism slip out of their mouths because that's the way that they were raised. So it feels very. It has this. I don't quite want to. I don't quite want to say like it's like a realism, but it has like a lived-in feel to it, where you're watching, where it feels like every character involved has 3 dimensions to them, where it doesn't feel like this is the villain that are that Paul has to best, or this is the bully he has to stop. It always feels like there's so much going on in these characters' lives, and that their perceptions of the American dream have kind of like shifted their perspective and their desires and how they see the future for themselves. Like at one point, they're watching like the election where Reagan is elected, and they basically, there's a dour moment where they basically realize, man, if Reagan's elected, that this could be the end of America. We could be screwed, So yeah, there's this very like bleak outlook on the future, but also this kind of like personal hopefulness. Like I believe at one point in the film there is a little bit of dialogue where it's basically stated, look, I don't really care about the future, but I care about what our place is going to be within it. Like I can't speculate Paul can't speculate what his career is going to be. It might be in rockets because he likes rockets. It might be in art because he really likes to draw and has a fascination with art. He doesn't know. And we don't know by the end either. He just kind of walks away from it all and tries to make his life better. And it is such a perfect ending for that. Like I said, there were so many moments here where I was on like the verge of tears for how Paul kind of tries to embody this stoicness to kind of like be there for his grandpa and be the bigger man and stand up to racists, even though it might not always work. Like especially like there's a great talk towards the end of the film where Paul speaks with Hopkins' character, and Hopkins basically says like, hey, did your fight work? And Paul's like, I don't think it did. And Hopkins like, yeah, there's going to be a lot of that, but you can't give up just because you lost one fight. And you kind of see like there is a little bit of like hope and inspiration, especially with how he has like a photo of Muhammad Ali on his wall to kind of like inspire him to go forward. Like, and you can tell like he wants to succeed. Like he has daydreams about being a success and imagining that he's like a prize fighter and all that. Like he wants to fight. So you have some hope for this kid by the end, that he's going to come out, that he might come out okay for it. And having that little bit of hope makes it so like hopeful, but like tearful at the same time, where it's like you don't quite have a clear answer, but there might be a good future for Paul. You never know. And just everything from like the setting, the tiny little daydreams that Paul has, the little moments of humor and what's the right word I'm looking for here? Not quite desire, but but passion for like a better world. All these little elements work so well that this is definitely one of my favorite films of the year. So yeah, Armageddon Time. It'll be in a few theaters this Friday. And I believe it will be having a wide release next week. So if you want to kick off your the November award season before we get obliterated with studio, because it's usually like towards the end of November is when like the studios all make a play for the for the biggest box office, because like the holiday box office is huge. So yeah, coming into November, it's going to be very busy. It's always very busy this time of year, mostly because there's a clash between getting all the festival films out and then getting all the holiday films out. So, especially like closer to like Thanksgiving, there's going to be a very rocky time. Because, of course, Disney is going to try to get a film out in time for Thanksgiving. And they're going to try to get it out before they got their other film, the new Avatar film coming out in December. And then, of course, you have the nightmare mess releases of Christmas Day films. Every year, there's always like a swath of Christmas release day, films that release on Christmas Day. So there's a lot coming up. In terms of what I got coming up that I'm going to be reviewing on this channel, what do we got? We're going to be reviewing the Banshees of Inisherin, I believe it's pronounced. The new film with Colin Farrell and Brandon Gleeson. They're back again from the director of In Bruges with a friendship that they're going to break off. I know this film's been hitting the festivals, but I didn't manage to get to the festivals this year. So I'm going to be covering that next week. What else are we covering? Oh, yes, we got a new Black Panther movie coming out in mid-November, so we're going to get that. We're going to get that film as well. And then probably too much else as November and December come crashing upon us. And I got so much that I got to see during that time, and also a lot that I'm going to catch up on for my end of the year list. All right, so towards the end of the stream here, so let's get a recap here. Hang on, that's a little loud there. I don't know why that's loud. Okay, so quick recap of the films we reviewed on today's stream. We reviewed Black Adam, it's an okay DC Comics film. It mostly delivers on the action, but doesn't deliver on the anti-imperialism that it brings up, and then never really explores all that much. Halloween Ends was a great way to end the Halloween trilogy by David Gordon Green by exploring the deeper themes of evil and its temptations. Let's see. Oh, there we go. The new Hellraiser, currently playing on Hulu. It's a great reprisal of what makes Hellraiser work so great. Especially, it's worth watching just alone for Jamie Clayton as the Hell Priest. She does a fantastic job in this film. We also reviewed Tar, the film with Cate Blanchett, who plays a problematic composer. There's so many great elements I love about the film, but all you really need to know is that Cate Blanchett gives one of the best performances of the year. Worth watching for that alone. And then finally, we have Armageddon Time, a retro drama about growing up in 1980 New York and addressing racism and realizing that the American dream is not quite what you thought it was. Fantastic performances all around, especially from Jeremy Strong, Anne Hathaway, and Anthony Hopkins, of course. This film just ripped my heart out. It's like it's got lots of hope and some great humor in it, like I said, but wow, just be prepared to have your gut punched from that film. So I think among all those films, like Armageddon Time is my favorite. Easily among all those. Like, I can't stop thinking about that film. Perhaps just because I saw it today. But it really resonated for me, and I feel like it's going to be a bit of a... I feel like it might get lost around awards time, but I hope it doesn't. I think at the very least, it's probably going to get some awards attention because of Anthony Hopkins. But all around, just an all-around great film by James Gary. Go see it this weekend in limited release, and I believe is expanding into a wide release next week on November 4th. All right. So, that, I believe, is all we have time for on this stream. So, if you want to check out any of my movie review writings, you can go to movieswithmark.com, filminquiry.com, and twincitiesgeek.com. If you can't wait for the video reviews, I'll have all the reviews on this stream edited into separate videos that will be out on this channel. But if you can't wait till then to see all my thoughts, you can go read at these different places. Websites. I was going to say places. Movieswithmark.com is probably the one place you'll find most of the reviews. So, in fact, I think you'll find all the reviews there except for Armageddon Time, since I just saw that. So, we will be back in a few weeks, and by that time we will have seen the Banshees of Inisherin and Black Panther: Wakanda Forever. So I will see you there next time. If you like, I I'm hesitant to do like the call to action. I know it's beneficial, but hey, if you like the channel, you know click the like button if you like it. If you want to see more of this, my movie review streams and more of the video essays that I do, then just subscribe. You know what to do. You've watched YouTube. You know. So yeah, want more cool movie reviews like this ahead of time, especially like Armageddon Time. Subscribe to listen to more of them. Or don't. Just keep me in your algorithms. Whatever you want to do. I'm not your mom. Okay, so yeah, that's all we got planned for this stream. So go out and see some good movies and happy Halloween. Have a good one.